The dawn began to break. The vibrant yellows, reds, and oranges lit the skies, adding an eerie beauty to the carnage and destruction below. The toilets still pounding at the door, the sun now cresting over the horizon as the group watched, trapped at the top of the building. Suddenly Ryoko's, Mikaru's, and Kuro's silk cell phones began to buzz and beep. They pulled them out and looked at the message. "Evacuate," read the message. Then an instant later Ryoko and Kuro's silk got another message. "Untenable," it read. Mikaru looking over at Ryoko's phone screen and asked, "What does that mean?" "It means the military is abandoning Tokyo," she interjected with agitation, as she walked towards a bag she had stowed to the side of the roof. "Why didn't your phone go off?" Mikaru asked as she looked at Lex. "Not a Japanese citizen, don't have a Japanese phone, probably not in the system to be alerted," he replied. Ryoko pulled a flare gun from her bag and flare. She cracked open the breech as she walked to the edge of the roof. She slid the flare into the gun and closed it. She climbed onto the border on the edge of the roof. Her skirt flapping in the breeze, she raised her right hand and fired the flare off. A long billowing line of green smoke shot up into the sky in an arcing motion. Moments later, other lines of green smoke arced into the air from around the city in the distance. "Now we pray." "Who's got incense?" said Ryoko as she hopped down off the roof edge. "What? Why?" stammered Mikaru. "You said they were supposed to pick you up at dawn. They have to come and get you." "Right. They promised," shouted Mikaru. Lex turned looking down and away, placing his hand on his head, as he watched the young girl slowly be hit by the weight of reality. Kuro's silk walked over to Mikaru and placed her right hand on Mikaru's left shoulder. "Just because they issued a withdrawal order doesn't mean anybody can get to us to get us out," informed Kuro's silk. "We just have to wait and see," said Ryoko, now on her knees at the edge of the roof praying. "If no one comes, we'll have to get ourselves out, and that is our only way out," Ryoko continued, as she pointed to the roof access door with the mass of toilets still clamoring behind it. Mikaru was taken aback by shock. "There's no way we can fight our way all the way back down the building," she cried. "Then I'll keep my promise," replied Ryoko, as she took her prayer position back up. Then on the far left corner of the roof, one of the giant camera machines appeared. Lex was the first to see it. "Whoa, what is that thing?" he shouted, drawing everyone's attention as he aimed his revolver. Everyone quickly turned and looked. "I saw one earlier. I think it's some kind of new drone," said Ryoko. The group relaxed. The tail camera on the machine wagged about, reflecting light as it viewed the situation. Then it jumped down the side of the building and was gone. "What is it, a camera dog?" quipped Lex. Small shimmers started to become visible in the distance. The group strained to see them and make out what they could be. Then the thrumming and chopping sound came through. "Helicopters." "They came," shouted Mikaru excitedly. They could start to make out UH-60 Black Hawk and UH-1 Iroquois Huey helicopters flying in. Suddenly the toilets behind the door became more agitated, and the door began to crack from all the pressure behind it. "They better hurry up and get here, we don't have much longer," shouted Kuro's silk. Ryoko grabbed Mikaru, turning her to her side, and started rummaging through the sack on her hip. Ryoko pulled another flare out and loaded it into the gun. She aimed and fired the green smoke flare. As the helicopters came closer, they could see some had American markings and others Japanese markings. The roof access door cracked more. A Black Hawk helicopter saw the green smoke and moved in and hovered just outside the rooftop edge. The doorman motioning for them to get on. Ryoko grabbed Mikaru and tossed her in. She turned and watched the roof access door as Kuro Silk and Lex climbed in. She scrambled in after. She turned to the side gunner in the window just past the cockpit, manning the M134 minigun. She pulled his left headphone back from his ear and leaned in, her lips almost touching, and shouted, "Light it up," as she pointed to the rooftop access door before falling on her back onto the helicopter floor. The gunner was confused for a brief second, then saw, as the door broke off the hinges and the debris in front was pushed away. A flood of toilets began to pour out the door. The gunner flipped the cover to the arming switch open, placed the switch to the armed position, and pressed down on the butterfly triggers. The electric motor revved, and the barrels began to spin, and a stream of red tracer rounds expeditiously left the barrels, striking Skibidi, after Skibidi eviscerating them into gore and porcelain dust. The rooftop access door was obliterated with the surrounding roof, creating a bigger hole, allowing more Skibidis to flow out. "Oh shit!" shouted the pilot as he yanked on the controls, banking the helicopter up and away. The gunner continued to fire until he was sure they were a safe enough distance from the building. Even the bullet hose reputation of the M134 minigun wasn't enough to make a noticeable dent in the number of Skibidis bubbling up from within the building to the roof. The heads of the Skibidis bobbed up and down as they stood at the edge of the building, shouting at the helicopter. Ryoko grabbed a spare headset from the hook behind the pilot and placed it to her free ear, and held the microphone in front of her mouth, blocking the microphone from her other headset. "Are they going to nuke the city?" Ryoko asked. "No, that would look bad. I think the higher-ups feel Japan has been nuked enough in its history. As far as we know, they're just pulling everything back and reconsolidating resources in the countryside for a future push back in. Our orders are to just grab everyone whose location we can confirm either by knowing where they were dropped or green flare location if you moved and didn't pop a flare when the emergency text went out. You're on your own," explained the pilot. "Ironic that it's toilets that have turned Tokyo to complete shit," snarked the co-pilot. The pilot nodded in agreement. Even the Americans aren't nuke Japan happy at the moment. Probably because they're too busy wondering if they should nuke Washington, D.C. The American forces left here are either following their last known orders the best they can or are helping us out the best they can. The further you get away from HQ, the foggier things start to get. The whole chain of command is starting to break down," added the pilot. The pilot turned the helicopter and began to head back. "We're not grabbing anyone else?" asked Ryoko. "You were our only scheduled pickup, and you came with other riders," replied the pilot. Kuro Silk, sitting near the open fuselage door, looked down and saw a man in the street fighting off toilets. She waved to Ryoko to get her attention and then motioned for her to look down. Ryoko moved to the open door and looked down to see. Ryoko looked at Lex sitting next to Kuro Silk. She pointed to him and then back down at the man in the street and then back at Lex again, inferring, "Is he with you?" Lex shook his head no. "We have a survivor 6 o'clock low," announced Ryoko. "Sorry, he's not on our itinerary. Only pickups from known locations." "He's on his own," returned the pilot. Ryoko's face turned sour, as did the rest of her crew. Kuro Silk's blade quickly found its way against the neck of the gunner in front of her, as Lex was on the co-pilot with his revolver. Mikaru trained her M4 on the other gunner, and Ryoko took the pilot with a small tactical knife from her belt. "Everyone we save is one more still in the fight," growled Ryoko in the pilot's ear. Okay. "Unscheduled pickup it is," he replied as he began to circle the helicopter back, hover over the position, and descend.